money and how God calls you to live a life that accords with Him and how that involves your money. As you guys know, I don't like to preach about money. I don't like to preach about giving and that sort of thing just because I feel like so many churches do it badly. I think the majority of churches are really good at telling you what they want from you regarding your money. A lot of churches aren't very good at telling you what they want for you, like the life that God has for you and how God is calling you to live a life that you enjoy, a life that He calls the rich life, a life that He says, this is the life that is truly life. And that's what we want for you. In order to talk about that, we have to be obedient to the text when the text says, instruct and teach these things. The Apostle Paul tells this young preacher, Timothy, hey, go into your church and teach them these principles about their money situation so that they can get away from the money trap. That is where we elevate our stuff, or we elevate our bank account, or we elevate our self-worth based on our money to the point of God, and we put God in subjection to our financial situation. And so this morning, I want to jump into the text. We've been, we're doing this whole month series in 1 Timothy chapter 6. It's an entire chapter about how God is calling you to live for Him with your finances in a life that is for you and for your enjoyment and for your good. In 2018, Janae and I needed good, reliable transportation. We were in a place where we said, you know what, we're actually going to go out and buy a vehicle, and it's going to be a good, decent vehicle. And so I kind of knew what I wanted, but being the nerd that I am, I went online and I did all my research and I did all my budget for it. And I went to Consumer Reports. I was like, okay, you know, what's the best kind of small size SUV that has everything we would need at the most efficient price, that's the most economical decision. And so Consumer Reports for that particular year loved the Subaru Forester. And so we went to the dealership and we test drove a new Subaru Forester. And we drove it. We liked it. It was good. The numbers worked out where we wanted. Everything was good. And then and we were like, well, you know, maybe we want to, you know, test our options, test drive some more. And so Janae was like, hey, I want to test drive the Subaru Outback. And the sales lady at the dealership said this. She said, okay, well, we can test drive it, but I need you to know up front, it's a little bit outside of your price range. It's not quite, the numbers don't quite meet where you want to be. And so we can test drive it for comparison, but don't fall in love. And that's what she said. I haven't forgotten it. She said, don't fall in love. And what do you think happened? If you guys know what we drive a Subaru Outback, because we went and we test drove the Subaru Outback and our hearts fell in love with it. It was a smoother ride. It was a little bit more what we wanted. And yeah, it was a little bit more, but we found a way to justify it and we've been paying on it ever since. That's kind of what happens, right? Your heart just desires things. Your eyes see things that you want. Your eyes see what your friends have and what other people have. Your eyes see the beautiful, fun, enjoyable lives that people pretend that they're living on social media, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, and you're scrolling through and you're seeing all the smiles and you're seeing all the stuff, and there's something in us that begins comparing ourselves to other people, and we go, well, I wish I had that, or I wish my house looked like that, or I wish I could take that kind of vacation, or maybe if I swipe the credit card a little bit, we can stretch our budget and we can afford that sort of thing. And so what ends up happening is our money just ends up chasing the whims of our cravings. Our money becomes enslaved to our appetites and our desires. And so we end up with a heart that is going after stuff and is in love with stuff and honors stuff and begins worshiping stuff. And then our wallet book begins to chase after it right after that. And so in order to kind of tackle that and address that, Paul teaches Timothy this in 1 Timothy chapter 6. If anybody teaches otherwise, so right before this, the end of verse 2, he says, instruct and teach these things. And so that's why we're doing it this way. I would love to just get into the weeds of just high theology and just preach the gospel to you and talk about the cross and talk about Jesus. You guys know the way I like to preach. My whole method is let me get out of the way so I'm not preaching my message, and just let me just throw some theology at you. And so we preach a lot of sermons that are like high view of God type of sermons that the goal of the preaching is just to get your heart to kind of wow over God and be amazed at the grandeur of God. And so I'm uncomfortable preaching money sermons. I'm uncomfortable talking about this kind of stuff. I know you're uncomfortable because money just makes people uncomfortable. We don't like to talk about it because we don't trust other people, and oftentimes we don't trust God with our money situation. But Paul has an entire chapter about this that he begins by saying, instruct and teach these things. So here we are just being obedient to the Bible. We are instructing and we're teaching these things. He actually says insist on these things. And then says if anyone teaches otherwise and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, it's not because it doesn't make sense. It's not because it's not good. It says they are conceited and they understand nothing. And this is what often happens, especially with money. Money is so easy to become such a big temptation that it becomes our God because we're so untrusting with anybody else's advice. Some people are just so discouraged or so insecure or really just kind of secretive about their money because they know they haven't made good financial decisions. Maybe they do have a little bit more debt than they would care to admit to. And so it's like, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it at the dinner table. Certainly, I don't want to hear sermons about it. And what he's saying is, hey, if you can't get around this, if you can't get behind this, if you can't wrap your mind around some of these concepts, it might be because the God that you worship is you. You might be conceited. It might be the issue that you're turning away from good, godly teaching is because of the self-centeredness, the conceit that lives in your heart. He says these people are conceited and they understand nothing. The people who don't teach good, sound, godly teachings on the basic principles that help you navigate your life. He says they're conceited. They understand nothing. They have an unhealthy interest in controversies. So in other words, these are just the drama people. And you know who I'm talking about. You know the people in your life that they're just drawn to whatever bit of controversy or whatever the next thing is that everybody's mad about. And so they like their controversies and quarrels. Their interest is in words that result in envy and strife and malicious talk and evil suspicions. And so these are people that they're not here to get their lives in order. They're not here to honor God. They're here to see how they can be a busybody and see what kind of trouble they can get into in stirring up controversy. And so they're here for whatever teachings fits their life. They're here for whatever teaching just promotes whatever kind of lifestyle they want to live. But the moment it challenges them, they reject it. They're suspicious of it. They're fearful of it. So this is like when you start to talk about tithing or giving in a sermon. There's always people there that roll their eyes and they're like, oh, here we go again. This person just wants my money. This person's just preaching this so that we'll give to their church. And so immediately they go into the evil suspicions where it's like, I don't trust them. They must have a hidden agenda. And what we know just through good psychology is people who say those things, it's often just transference and projection. It's often them just projecting onto you what they're actually struggling with or what the Bible says. This is just evil suspicions, it's malicious talk, and it's strife. And so he says these people have constant friction between people of corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means to financial gain. And so he says, instruct and teach these things. If people do not instruct and teach these things, it's because they're conceited and they're going to get drawn into the drama, into the scandal, into the sensational. And these are the same kind of people who tend to think that godliness is a means to financial gain. And so Jesus, later on, we're going to get to the text, but Jesus once taught that you can't have two masters. You can't serve God and money. One of them is going to serve the other. And so if you're here this morning and money is a big idol to you, first of all, you're not alone. If you're watching this online and you know you want to worship God, but you also sacrifice at the altar of wealth and money, and it's easy to make money your God. If you're one of those people, you might be deceived into believing that God is kind of like the ATM machine God, that if you pray to him enough, if you tithe to him enough, then he's going to turn around, he's going to bless you with all sorts of things. And believe me, if your heart is really just worshiping money and you're using God to get who your real God is, if you're just using God so that you can better enjoy what God has to give you, you might be one of those people where godliness is a means to financial gain. And so what that means is you're going, God, If I give to you and you turn around and you give me mansions and speedboats and all of that, then I'll worship you. If you allow me to indulge in what my real God is, then I'll worship you. But God, if you take from me, if you're one of those gods that the life that you have for me is not whatever I've already decided, like you can be God so long as you're in subjection to me and my plan and my finances and my budget. Like if you bless me that way, then I'll worship you. Otherwise, you're not a God that I want to believe in. Then you might be worshiping the false God, the prosperity God, the God of the ATM machine, where you're convinced that the only real reason to be a Christian, to worship God, is for all the free stuff that comes with it. And instead, what he's teaching is saying, look, these people, they're mistaken. They're deceived. They have it wrong. That is not where the worth of your life comes from. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. If you can learn to worship God so much that he's your treasure, he's where what your heart longs for. He's what you are investing in. And so much so that everything that God gives you, you're just good with. Like, God, if you give me a bunch, I'll be content with a bunch. And God, if you give me a little bit, I'll be content with a little bit, because it's all yours and it all comes from you. And you're really what satisfies my heart. You're really what comforts my soul. You're really where I derive my joy and my security and my peace and my prosperity. It's not in stuff. It's not in wealth. It's not in accolades. It's not in status. It's not in watching my credit score go up. It's not in trying to have all the nice things so I can show off to my friends how important I am. That really it's in you, that my joy comes from you. If you can figure that out, that's what we're going to talk about this morning. If you can figure this out, how to be godly and just content in the life that God has for you, he says that is great gain. Why? Because we brought nothing into the world. It's all his. It all belongs to God. We take nothing out of it. You can spend your entire life trying to make a bunch of money for yourself, and then one day you're going to have to die, and you're going to answer for it, and you don't get to take any of it with you. Godliness that results in you trying to have a whole bunch of stuff for yourself merits you nothing, but godliness with contentment is great gain, because you can't take any of this stuff with you. He says, but if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. You can be content. Trust that God's going to take care of you, that he's giving you enough for what you need. And see, the alternative is this. Those who want to get rich, notice this is not a sermon against riches or rich people. What we saw last week is if you are in America, just to be here in America in 2024, you're rich. And you're blessed. And you can be one of the poorest people in this country, and you're still one of the richest people in the world. You can be one of the poorest people in 2024, and you still live a life that has way more abundance and comfort than what the wealthy people were living with back then when this was written. We are the rich people. We are blessed beyond measure. We live in the richest times in one of the richest places in the world. So even if you're poor, you're rich. Those who want to get rich, that's the problem. It's the want to. It's the desire. It's not being content by God going, hey, look, I've called you to be a good giver, so I'm going to bless you with a lot. And then somebody else going, no, I called you to be a good servant. I'm not going to bless you with a lot because it's going to be a temptation for you. I'm going to bless you with what you need. And us in our maturity and our wisdom going, God, I just trust you. If you give it to me, then it's for me. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to assume I would jack it up if you did give it to me, and therefore it's not for me. Like whatever you give me, I'm good with. The problem is it's the craving. It's the appetite. It's our eyes scanning the world, noticing all the things we wish we had, and then our hearts going after it, so much so that those who want to get rich, so it's not about rich or not rich. It's about your desire. It's about your craving. It's about your appetite. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I won't repreach that because we talked about that last week. But he goes on and says this, for the love of money, it's your desire. It's really checking in with yourself going, God, what do I really love? What am I drawn to? What do I treasure right now? The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And so some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. The problem is we just keep wanting more. And there's no amount of more that's ever enough for the longing heart, for the conceited heart, for the unsatisfied and unfulfilled heart. We can keep grabbing stuff and buying stuff and acquiring stuff and striving to get more, and enough is never quite enough. And so he says it's a trap. These people are falling into a trap. They're falling into a trap where they think, if I can just get that next thing, then I'll finally feel good. If I can just get that new car, if I can just stretch my budget a little bit and just maybe have a few more just comfort meals, right? Just go to the restaurant a little bit more often. You know what? We really need a break. I'll just swipe the credit card this time. And he's going, it's a trap, because none of that fulfills you. You're going to spend the money. You're going to make the mistakes. You're going to create the debt. You're going to worship the God of wealth. And at the end of the day, you're still going to feel like there's something missing in here. You're still going to feel like you're not living the life that you were supposed to live. There's still going to be that nagging feeling in you telling you you were made for more than just to consume the stuff around you. It's a trap. It's a temptation that leads many people to destruction, because none of that will ever satisfy your soul. He says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people eager for it lose their faith and wander into all kinds of grief. And you skip down a little bit. For time's sake, we're going to skip a little bit. We pick back up in verse 17. He says this is his solution. Command those who are rich. We talked about that. That's us, right? Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth. And if you were here last week, that's what we talked about. How do we get our hope out of other things and put our hope in God? He says, don't put your hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And that's the promise. God's going, I've got a life for you, and if you would trust me, if you would just do it my way, this is a life that you will enjoy. I'm giving you everything you need for your enjoyment. There's a lot of stuff you're craving, a lot of stuff your eyes are drawn towards, a lot of stuff your heart is going after that will not provide you joy. I have a life for you to enjoy. I'm giving you everything you need for your enjoyment. I feel like so many believers, like Christians today, they don't trust God. They don't believe God. They go, I know that God's a good God and he does good stuff. I just think he does that to other people and not messed up people like me. And it couldn't be further from the truth. God richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And so if you've got a life of stress and misery, and you look at your financial situation, you're like, I don't even want to have the discussion. My stomach just turns the moment I start looking at this stuff. Like I'm a slave to my budget because of the mistakes that I made. Like if you're just living in the turmoil, it's one of the number one stressors in marriage. It's one of the number one cited stressors just in life that so many adults are just constantly struggling with financial insecurity and the stress that comes from living this way. And he goes, man, if you'll just trust me, if you'll put your hope in me, I'll provide you with everything that you need for your enjoyment. I want you to enjoy your life. You just got to stop chasing after the wrong thing. There's no joy there. That's the trap. That's the temptation. That's the lie of the devil. You can spend and you can search and you can seek and you can crave and you can hunger for more and you can do everything you can to acquire more for yourself, and there is no joy there. And so he says, instead, command them to do good and command them to be rich, but listen, be rich in good deeds. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Why? Because this is how you avoid the trap. This is how you learn to be content with the life that God is calling you towards, trusting that it's better for you than the life that you're trying to work out for yourself on your own. He says, command them to give and to be generous and to be willing to share. And in this way, they will lay up for themselves treasures as a firm foundation for the coming age. What's that sound like? Remember when Jesus said that? When Jesus said, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth will eat and rust will destroy. Rather, store up for yourself treasures in heaven. And here he is. Paul is some years later quoting Jesus having said that. And he says, in this way, this is how you do it. This is how you lay up for yourself treasures for the coming age, so that they may, look at this, if you do it this way, if you do it God's way, you trust God with your finances, he says, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. There's so many people out there, believers, even Christians, that are missing out on the life that God has for them because they keep falling back into the temptation of thinking that you're not there yet, that you don't have what you need, that God's not taking care of you, and if you had just a little bit more. And so what do? As God moves in our life and we get that promotion, or we secure that job, or we do good with our budget and with our saving, we start getting a little bit more in the bank. We start figuring it out as we just navigate being an adult. We start managing what we have a little bit better. What's the trap that most of us fall into? We just raise our expectations. And we allow our quality of life to continue to creep up until we're still, once again, stressed out about money, not able to afford what we wish we had, frustrated that we don't have the quality of life we want, which is so ironic because if you'll think about it, you think about how it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, however long ago for you. Like you think about those days where you were just like, God, if I could just have just enough to get by and get my bills paid, maybe a little house and something to drive, then that would be enough. And then you get all of that. Like, yeah, but man, if I could really just have a house with a bigger yard, and maybe, everybody has a pool. We deserve a pool. If we could just have that, then it would be, and it's never enough. And you're never satisfied. And your lifestyle gets more and more expensive, and the debt stays there. The stress stays there. The struggle and the worry and the insecurity and the embarrassment of the money mistakes that you continue to make, it all stays there, even though your situation keeps getting better. And God calls this, he says, it's a trap. It's the money trap. And you fall into it because of your craving and because of your desires. But if you will be rich in deeds, if you will be generous and willing to share, if you'll learn to be content, if you'll just hope in God, if you'll just trust in him and do it God's way, the promise is God says, I'll take you out of the trap and I'll give you the life that is truly life. You see those words there. I'll give you the life that I created you to live. Get out of the hustle and bustle, get out of the trap, get out of the struggle, and step into the life that I have for you. Jesus said it this way in Matthew chapter 6. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, bless you, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. And then he says this, and look, we've heard this before. Maybe this doesn't move you. I want you to just take yourself back 2,000 years and hear how absolutely revolutionary this statement is. He says, the reason you're storing up treasures in heaven and not hoarding stuff here on earth is because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your treasure is, your heart is. That your heart and your treasure are tethered to one another. And so if you plant one somewhere, the other's going to follow. And so what Jesus is saying, he's saying, look, you can show me the receipts and I can tell you where your heart is. Just show me the receipts. You show me the family man who loves his family and would do anything for his family. And his kid has shoes that are falling apart, but he just bought a new truck, right? You know where his treasure is. You know where his heart is. You look at where he spends his money. You look at his bank account. You look at his receipts, and we can go, look, we can say all we want on Sunday morning about how much we love Jesus, how much we serve God, and then you can look at our receipts, and he goes, look, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. I know where your heart is. I know where you're at right now because I can look at your bank account. I can look at where your treasure is. This word treasure here, treasure is a good translation. It means something like storehouse. It's like where you store your treasure. It's the place where you keep everything that's valuable, that's important to you. That's kind of the word that we're translating over. Jesus is saying this in the Aramaic, and so it's this idea of there's something like you've got something that you're investing in. You've got something where it's like, this is the part of my life that has all my value. This is the part of my life that I treasure. This is the part of my life that I'm really pouring into. And God's saying, wherever that is, whatever that is for you, that's where your heart's going to be, that your heart is going to follow that. And so here's what we do as the American consumers that we are. And even if you're a Christian, even if you're trying to do it God's way, there's so much materialism and consumerism ingrained in our culture that it's so easy for us to fall into this trap where our heart wants something. It just sees it and it goes, man, it'd be nice if I had that. And you look at what your friends have and you desire that. And you look at what they have on TV and you desire that. And so your heart just starts going towards these other things. And if you are undisciplined, if you don't budget well, if you made some of these money mistakes that he's calling us to avoid in this chapter, then you might be one of those people that as your heart goes after it, your finances follow. And so because your heart's there, your treasure's there, and you start pouring into it. And so it might be a new hobby, it might be a new relationship, it might be a new career ambition, it might be some kind of new interest. It might just be watching that number grow in your bank account and then letting it affect your ego. Whatever it is for you, your heart goes after it, and then your finances follow, right? So it's as simple as you walk into the grocery store and you see the impulse items, and your eye sees it, and your eye lusts for it. Your eye is envious, and it wants it. Other people have it. You deserve it. You work hard, so why not? And so your heart goes after it. And even if you tell yourself, no, I don't need that. It's not my budget right now. Once your heart's there, you've all had those things. And Tanner and I talk motorcycles, right? And we've been talking, we have the bikes that we have, and they're okay. And we also have the bikes that we wish we had, right? And we talk about it. We're like, man, I wish if I had enough money, I would buy one. Oh, I like those too. Have you seen this? And we talk about it, right? And so what happens is we start just imagining what our life would be like if we had whatever the thing was. And our heart starts going after it. And we start fantasizing about it. We start imagining how it would change our identity, how it would make us feel. It feels so good to own that thing. I'd feel so secure. I'd finally feel like I'd made it. And then the moment you get there, you just move the goalposts. And now you want something else and you still don't feel like you've actually made it. But all it takes is for you to put your heart there. And once your heart's there, if you're like so many of us that are just part of our culture, the finances follow. And so because your heart's there, the treasure follows. And then Jesus says the other way. He goes, no, you don't have to do it that way. You can just decide where you want your heart to be and then put your treasure there. Budget for that, build for that, plan for that, become that. He goes on. We'll get back to this, but he goes on and he explains it this way. He says, look, the eye, and this part's weird, but he says the eye is the lamp of the body. And if your eyes are healthy, or your translation might say if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, or if your eyes grow dark, then your whole body will be full of darkness. And if then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And just right there, if you're reading that, you're going, okay, well, we were talking about money, and now we're talking about the eye and the lamp and light and dark, and I don't really understand what that means. But then the very next verse, he says this, no one can serve two masters. So whatever you're looking at, the eye is the lamp of the body, and whatever you're focused on, whatever your heart's going after, whatever you keep being drawn to, whatever your eye keeps catching as it looks out at all the shiny things that are fighting for your attention. He says what's going to happen is you're going to end up having to make a choice. Do I want that? Am I willing to put God in subjection to that? Or am I willing to trust God? Do I want what God is offering to me? And am I willing to put the desire in subjection to God? He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And he says, you cannot serve God and money. You can't serve them both. One of them is going to serve the other. You will use one to serve the other. You can't serve both. You can use both. You can try to take advantage of both. You can try to live selfishly and have the conceited heart. But if you are serving your master, the question is, which master are you serving and which one serves the other? Because if you're like one of those people, like we read earlier, if you believe godliness is a means to financial gain, then what you'll do is you'll go to a church that preaches the false gospel that we call the prosperity gospel. And the prosperity gospel basically goes like this. I would love to be a prosperity gospel preacher. It would benefit me so well. It just isn't the Bible, so I can't get there. I'm not a good enough preacher to make the Bible say that, but so many preachers can twist it and make it say something like, if you guys just tithe enough to me, If you guys just put enough in the plate, then God wants to bless you, and he's going to give you a mansion. He's going to give you a speedboat. And if you don't have your mansion, your speedboat, and your vacation home, if you're not living large, it's only because you're not faithful enough and you haven't put enough money into the plate. If you would just give me a little, and then what ends up happening is preachers get filthy rich preaching that kind of gospel, and everybody else in the congregation, some people make it and go, see, God's good, I gave, and he blessed me, and the other people, they don't make it, and the preacher just goes, well, it's because you didn't have the faith. You should have given more. Right? It's one of the oldest scams in religion, but it's still happening because so many people believe godliness is a means to financial gain. And so what happens is they go, okay, well, I'll serve God so long as God is actually serving my financial situation. So what I really worship is money. What I really worship is the status that I believe that wealth brings me. And so I'll be a Christian so long as God can make that happen. Which is us just saying, you're not God, I'm God, but I'll pretend that you're God so long as you do things my way. Or, alternatively, you will end up using your money to serve God. If you go, God, you're my master. I don't have another master. You're who I worship. You're where I get my purpose for my life. You set me on paths of righteousness. And I know, even though I have my temptations, and even though I struggle, and even though I mess up, I know when I do it your way, my life is better because I step into the life that you designed me for. So I'm worshiping God, and I'm going to use my money to serve my master rather than worshiping money and attempting to use God to serve your master. He says, you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So how do we do it as Christians? How do we live the content life? Where we go, God, I want to avoid the trap. I want to stop making the same mistakes I keep making. I want to have the kind of life where when I take a vacation, it's paid for out of my abundance. I'm not having to acquire debt. I want to live the kind of life where we're paying down our debt and we're living well and we're creating some margin in our life. So the next emergency or the next financial situation we get into, it's not a crash and burn situation. Like, you've given me enough room in my budget that I can live on mission. And so if something bad happens, I'm not floundering and I'm not freaking out, that God gives me everything I need to enjoy my life if I just live his way. And here's what Jesus says. He says, can we go back to the verse? He says, where your treasure is, there's your heart. They go together. So here's what you do. If you're a Christian and you're trying to figure this out and you're going, God, what's the practical step that I can take to make sure you're God and you're reigning in my life and I'm content with whatever you give me? So if you bless me with it, if it's mine, and if you don't bless me with it, then that's okay because I've learned to be content with whatever it is. Then here's what he says. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So here's what you do. Seth Godin. It's weird because after service, I went back there and Hunter had a Seth Godin book that he's reading. It's a marketing book. But a line I picked up from Seth Godin, he says, people like me do things like this. And I encourage you, learn that line. It's very helpful to you because you get to just kind of look at people that are succeeding in ways that you're not. And you just simply ask the question, well, what do they do that I don't? And then you just decide what kind of person you're going to be. So Janae and I are making some lifestyle changes with getting a little bit healthier in our schedule and kind of what we eat and when we go to the gym, some of that stuff, all the stuff that I'm not going to talk about up here. But we're trying, we're doing our thing, right? And we're using that phrase, hey, people like us do things like this, right? Because we know there's people that are a little bit healthier than us and they're a little bit more fit than us and they've got a little bit more energy than us. And we look at them, we go, those kind of people tend to eat clean and go to the gym a lot. And so we go, hey, are we willing to be those people? People like us do things like this. And so we just make it a routine. We decide who we want to be, and we start doing that thing. Or as he says it here, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You just get to decide, where do you want your heart to be? Where do you want your heart to be? And whatever it is, like here's what you say. Put your treasure where your heart says it's important. Right? And so if you're sitting there going, I'm a Christian, so God comes first in my life, great, put your treasure there. Because if you put your treasure there, the promise of Jesus is where your treasure is, your heart will be. Your heart will get there. When we talk about your heart, I mean, I'm talking about that part of you, the realest real, the you deep down in here, the you with all the heart, all the hurts and all the pains and all the aches. That person, who does that person want to be? Where do you want your heart to be? What do you want organizing your life? Where do you want your true self, your true identity to look like who you are on the inside? And if you can figure that out, like I want to honor God, and I want to love my family, and I want to serve my city, and I want to live a life of impact and influence and purpose. I want to see people's lives change because of how God has moved in my life. Like if you're one of those people that's just, I think Churchill said, it's not enough to, what did he say? It's not enough to live. We should be determined to live with purpose. You should make a difference. Your life should count for something. And so as you kind of figure out what that is, you just simply go, where do I want my heart to be? And am I willing to put my treasure there? People like me do things like this. And so you just decide, okay, what am I going to give my life to? What am I going to give my money to? What's really important to me? And then you just give it. And so first you give to what's most important, and then you save whatever amount you purposed in your budget and in your heart to save, and you live off the rest. And that's what God is teaching here. For where your treasure is, your heart will be. If you just decide where you want your heart to be, then put your treasure there. Budget that way. Plan your life around that. Be that kind of person and put your money where your mouth is. Paul once said in Philippians chapter 4, I think verse 11 and 12, Paul said, he's writing to the church in Philippi. He loves this church and they love him, and they've got a good relationship. And so he's wanting to kind of dismiss their concern. And he's going, hey, don't worry about me. I know I'm under house arrest, and I know I'm dealing with a lot right now because I'm preaching the gospel and I got arrested for it. He said, but look, I've learned to live with a lot, but I've also learned to be content with just a little. And then he says, for I've discovered the secret to living with much and the secret to living with a little, to being content with much and to being content with a little. And then he gives us a secret. You know what the secret is? You probably know the Bible verse. You just didn't know that Paul was saying that it's a secret to living a life of contentment. He says, the secret is this: I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That's what he says. He says, I've learned the secret to living a content life, whether you have a lot or whether you have a little. And the secret is I can do it with Jesus. I can do all things with Jesus. I know we are more familiar with that verse when people like put it on the side of their helmet or something. And it's like, I can do all things through Christ. I can make that tackle, or I can make that block, or I can be a better athlete. Like that's normally how we hear it, but that's not how Paul says it in Philippians. He says, this is the secret to living with contentment, is just trusting God when God gives you a lot. He wants to give it to you. He wants to bless you. When God gives you a blessing, you take it, and you don't fight over your self-worth, and you don't feel insecure about it. You don't feel embarrassed when you have more than someone else. Like you just learn to be content with all the blessings that God gives you. But the other side of that is you got to learn to be very open-handed with it. You got to learn the secret to contentment is to trusting God when you have a lot, but also trusting God when you only have a little bit. Why? Because I can do all of it through Jesus. When Jesus is my focus, when Jesus is my treasure, when he's what I organize my life around, I can do all things. I can live a life of abundance, and I can live a life of scarcity. I can live a life where I can bless others and give to others and do a lot. And I can also live a life where I'm just trusting God for my food and clothing because I don't know where my next meal is coming from. And I can do all of that through Christ who gives me strength. When I'm focused on him, when the eye that is the lamp of the body is focused on him, when my eyes are fixed on Jesus, all of the other stuff seems to matter less. So here's my practical advice to you guys. If you're wanting to live a life where God gives you everything you richly enjoy, and you want to live the life that God says is truly life, then what you have to do is start putting your money where you want your heart to be, because where your treasure is, your heart is there also. And so decide what's most important to you and give to it. So if you're a family person, if your family is everything to you, set your budget. Do the hard, annoying work of doing a good budget for you and your family, and just decide up front, this is how much we're giving to my family. If you're a church person, if you're a Christian, decide how much. Like, purpose in your heart what's going to God. And just decide, hey, if God is my treasure, then that's where I'm going to put my treasure. I'm going to put my treasure in God. I'm going to put my wealth there. So I'm going to give to my church. I'm just going to decide if God's calling me to serve my city, I'm going to give to my city. And I'm just going to purpose in my heart to put it all there. I'm going to budget it all out. And the next thing I'm going to budget is how much am I saving? And so I'm going to budget how much I give. I'm going to budget how much I save, and I'm just trusting God that if I put my treasure there, my heart will be there. And I know my heart longs for other things. I know my heart wants to go after all the trappings of the world. But if I'll just put my treasure where God's calling me to put my treasure, my heart will be there. My heart will follow. I will begin to enjoy the life that God has for me. And then with whatever's left over, that's what you live off of. That's what you make it work for your life. And so I would encourage you, an easy way to do this. If you really want to get serious and go, God, I'm tired of just living by whatever my heart is drawn after and then just praying that you'll figure it out for me because I made another silly financial mistake. If you're wanting to get some control around this, my recommendation to you is automate it. How many of you, you already automate, your car payment or your house payment or your phone bill or your insurance already is just directly out, right? So what would happen if you decide to do that with all the other things? If you go, you know what, the very first thing is I want to decide my heart is going to be my family and my church and my city, and so I'm going to put my treasure there. I'm just going to allocate that. You can go to riverside.faith/give. Those of you that just purpose in your heart that you want to support the ministry here. And I'm not asking, this is a sermon about what we want for you, not what we want from you. But if you do decide to support Riverside, then you can automate it. Make it recurring. Purpose in your heart and going, I don't even want to see it. I don't even want to be tempted not to give it. I'm just going to automatically decide, God, I want to give to your church because I want my heart to be there. And my fickle heart keeps being drawn to other things, so I'm going to make sure my heart's there. You go, man, I want to save for my kids' college, or I've got this vacation, this family vacation we want to do. And so you give to that and make it automatic. The money goes there automatically. And then you decide, how much am I going to save so that I can create some margin, so I can live well? Because the more, I heard somebody say, who is this? This is Hauser, who wrote The Psychology of Money. He said, the easiest way to have less money is to spend your money showing everybody that you have money. I thought that was good because so many of us do that, right? We spend our money in order to show other people that we have money. And then he goes, that's the easiest way to make sure that you have less money, right? And so the next thing you're going to do, you automate what you're going to give to, and then just automate what you're going to save. This amount of money is what we're going to save every time so we can make sure we're living within our margin. There's a church in Canada who likes to say it this way at their church. They go, we want to teach you how to live on margin so that you have enough to live on mission. And I love the idea of that you're gonna give to God. You're going to give to whatever's important to you. You just decide, here's where I want my heart to be, so I'm going to put my treasure there. And you start giving to it. And then you automate your saving, so you're not getting into trouble the next time. So you're making sure that it's all coming from God and it's all going where God says it's going to go. And then the rest of it is what you live off of. And if you do that, what's going to happen in your life is you will force yourself to make sure that your heart can't wander off into all the dangerous traps of the world. You're just going to force yourself. You're going to go, I want to be this kind of person because people like me do things like this. I want my heart to be here. I want my heart to be focused on my faith and focused on my family and focused on serving my city. I want to be generous. I want to live well. I want to serve others. I want to enjoy the peace that surpasses understanding. I want to get outside of all the financial insecurity that I have. And so because I want my heart here, I'm going to put my treasure here. Because Jesus says where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And the result of that is we get out of this game where we long for more and we're never satisfied. And God seems good, but we never really get to feel his goodness because we're so distracted and so drawn to other things. And we get to step into the life that God says is truly life. You just have to decide, what are my eyes going after? What is my heart drawn to? And is it really what I want out of this life? And if it's not, if you're normal, if you're just a regular person, then you're going to find that your heart keeps getting drawn to all kinds of things that your mind is telling you, you know better. Don't go after that. Don't put your hope in that. Don't put your faith in that. Put your hope and your faith in Jesus. Trust Jesus with what he has. Learn to enjoy godliness with contentment, because that is great gain. I'm excited to get to preach this series to you, even though I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't like talking about money, but I really believe it's such a trap, and it's such a big stressor for so many of you guys. So let us just leave it there for this morning. I want to pray for you guys in just a minute, but for now, I just want to encourage you, man. If you'll just decide, people like me do things like this. People like me give. People like me love. People like me don't get caught up in the trappings of going after every little thing. I want my heart to be focused on Jesus. I want my heart to be focused on my loved ones. I'm going to give there. I'm going to save well. I'm going to live off the rest because I trust God more than I trust myself. That's what I want for you guys. I want you guys to give your life to God so fully that you know exactly what he means when he says, I've given you everything you need to enjoy your life. I hope you guys will step into the true life that only happens when you decide you're going to position your life around what God is teaching you, trusting that godliness with contentment is great gain. If you're here this morning, you don't know Jesus. And so all of this sounds a little bit suspicious to you, and you go, man, it can't really be that easy. I just want to invite you to get to know your Savior. Get to know who you were created for. Understand that you were made for a true life with a real purpose. You were made to worship him and to glorify him and to make much of him. And the more you can organize your life to be able to do that well, the more you will enter into what the Bible calls the joy of the Lord, or what the Bible calls the peace that surpasses understanding. All of that is for you if you want it to be. You just got to decide, that's where I want my heart. And if that's where I want my heart, then that's where I'm going to put my treasure. Is Jesus your treasure? If he's not, but you know he should be, we want to pray with you. If you're not a Christian and you haven't given your life to Jesus, we want to invite you to step into the good life. If you don't know what that looks like, but you want to know more about it, we invite you to come forward as we stand and as we sing.